Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you are tuning us in or listening to this show in the far reaches of the future. It is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. And it's kind of the first day of real spring here in central New York State, which is wonderful. I'm actually considering packing away the polar fleece and getting out the lighter weight clothing, but it'll snow tomorrow if I know my region well. So I want to begin with a brief monologue. And Race, that is Mr. Race Hobbs, our esteemed producer, can you find a photograph of the late, great Lee Spiegel in the next 2 minutes or so and just get that picture up? I ask you to do that because yesterday or Friday, I received my newest issue of the On X magazine, which all of you who are subscribers receive. And, you know, on the surface, it's not that much different than, you know, if you're a subscriber to PBS or any subscription-driven print publication. But it really gets better with each issue. And it is published by our, well, as we would call it in New York, the boss of bosses here at On X, Majic K. And I turned to like the second page, and I absolutely felt my face light up with a smile. I'm going to read this to you verbatim, but first to say that last year, a number of us lost a really dear friend, and the world lost a great journalist, especially one who was very courageous in the area of UFOs and the paranormal. He was a Huffington Post's writer on the subject for 6 or 7 years, an independent researcher, investigator, prime mover in the original United Nations attempt to establish a panel to study UFOs. And we lost him last year to cancer. And I don't remember whose idea it was. Maybe it was Lee's. Maybe you remember, Race. But we kind of got it into our head that his ashes should be shot into space. And a online event happened to raise the money necessary. And the upshot I'm about to read to you. Lee Spiegel's ashes went to space March 4th. SpaceX had a successful launch on March 4th, and Lee Spiegel's ashes are now orbiting Earth. This mission has multiple cameras set up so that it was quite a spectacular sight. The mission director stated the satellite that the Beyond Burial's payload container is attached to will remain in orbit for 12 to 24 months, which means, of course, a year or two from now, Lee will come burning through the atmosphere, gloriously returning to Earth. We are sure that Lee's spirit is traveling in space just where he would want to be. Perhaps he is among friends. We will provide everything with the tracking link as soon as it becomes available. That means, and thank you, Margie, this is just amazing, that those of us that know and love Lee can know when he's passing overhead or wherever he is at the moment. Launch That's information.
That's very true, Peter. You can actually track where his small little capsule is as it goes around orbit of the Earth.
I don't know, Race. I've known a lot of people who are now dead people, but I don't know any of them who have decided to do this after they're dead. And I hope everybody who knows this great guy and loves him is enjoying this as much as I do. Only other information is it was launched from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in Santa Barbara, California. Launch pad is given. Launch date was the 4th of March. Launch time, 1:15 p.m., a nice time to go up. Mission name, Transporter 10. So, way to go, Lee. And my guest for tonight is another old friend who is very much alive, I'm very glad to report. Born in Maryland in 1955, Ryan S. Wood first became interested in UFOs when his father, Dr. Robert M. Wood, was engaged in deciphering the physics of UFOs while managing a research project, I might add a very highly classified research project, on antigravity for the McDonnell Douglas Corporation between 1968 and 1970. Ryan is regarded as a leading authority on the Majestic 12 intelligence documents, UFO crashes, and military retrievals. He's the author of Majic Eyes Only, the AI Ufologist, the Majestic Documents and SOM1-01 Majestic Document Operations Group Operational Manual. He is a frequent lecturer at UFO and other conferences, has spoken before numerous civic organizations, and presented a UFO lecture to a class on national security affairs at the Naval Postgraduate School. Wood has taught college courses on UFOs and was the organizer of the always outstanding Crash Retrieval Conference, which for 7 years was held annually in Las Vegas. Ryan Wood manages the contents of majesticdocuments.com, and along with his father, was the executive producer of The Secret, a sci-fi channel documentary series concerning UFO crashes, military retrievals, and the authenticity of the MJ-12 documents. Ryan is married, the father of 3 children, and a triathlete. And Ryan Wood, it's a pleasure to welcome you, finally, to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Well, thanks, Peter. It's great to come back after raising the kids for, a decade or so, and re-engage with the world of ufology after David Grush sort of gave the green light to crash retrievals that we were some 18 years ahead of. It's just amazing that it took that long for a whistleblower to come forward.
I wanted to ask you before I forgot, are you still involved in the developing aerospace company that we had talked about some years ago? The idea that you guys were working on and developing was this robotic kind of pod that could go into disaster areas, forest fires, whatever, and retrieve people and get at least a few of them out of there. Is that something that you're still involved in?
Well, I think you're talking about Frontline Aerospace, and we developed a drone that could do fire suppression as well as troops resupply. It was called V-STAR, Vertical Swift Tactical Aerial Resource. But no, I'm still the CEO of that company, Frontline Aerospace. But the last 2-3 years, I've been focused on being the CEO of Electric Fusion Systems. So I'm working on fusion, hot fusion, not cold fusion. And furthermore, it's what they call antineutronic, which means without neutrons, without radiation. So small, portable, compact roller bag power supply that could transform the world. I mean, that's my day job. My hobby is still ufology. So that's sort of where I'm at with that business angle. But I can talk more about that if you want, because it's transformative. I mean, UFOs don't go on kerosene. It's either they got anti-gravity or they got fusion. It
is fun to kind of try to visualize one that does run on kerosene.
Right.
Seems somewhat less threatening in any respect. And we will get to all of this more in depth as we move on into the 2 hours. But I want to begin with you, as I usually do with guests. And for me, get a sense of the sweep, the arc that deposited you at the other end, becoming the person who you are in this world. And just to begin, your dad, who is 96 now, is somebody, as you know, that I have tremendous admiration and affection for. Growing up with this extraordinary intellect, and a man highly trusted with seminally important secrets, puts you in a category unlike any guest I think I've ever had. And how you became interested in the subject by virtue of your father's involvement also is kind of a unique circumstance. So
Sure.
kind of beginning at the beginning, where and when were you born? And a little bit about your early family life, if I might pry.
Sure. I mean, I was born in Maryland for all of $1 at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Was my my dad was in the military doing V2 trajectory analysis instead of going to Korea, which was good. He might have got killed in Korea. So then I moved to Southern California, Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, where I grew up. And then I suppose the key breakthrough for me really was I was about 15 years old when Stanton Friedman came home with my dad for dinner.
I want you to hold that because that's special. And
Right.
I want to go back to childhood and brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I got one sister, but she's passed away actually of cancer. Younger sister. So other than that, no, there's cousins and stuff, but
Were you a precocious reader? Did you start reading fairly young, or did you take to it after a while? And I guess my question is, when you finally at 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever the age is, could read on your own, what were the books and the kinds of books you gravitated toward?
Well, this may surprise you, but I didn't like reading. I liked going to the garage and building things. I liked math. I liked science. I liked engineering. I got a degree in math and computer science. I didn't have to read that much. So it's more later in life that I learned the skill, and in business, you're ultimately judged continually on how good a public speaker you are, how well your written communications are, how well your interpersonal skills are. And so, I mean, that's sort of the acid test in life. And then you can learn the technical stuff for the most part. But that's nothing really sunk in with me as far as reading goes. It was far more the intrigue of it was about cars and dune buggies and boats and things like that, for
Wonderful.
me.
Were you a movie-going family, or did you come to movies either on TV or, out with the family? It's a point of always a curiosity for me as a movie lover. And what kind of films did you like originally when you first started to be exposed to films as a kid? And how did it kind of gestate?
This was, back where you just, leave the house. I'll be back in a few hours. No cell phones. So in the summer we went to the movies quite a bit, but I remember going to Santa Monica and seeing 2001. I mean, that was, I would say, one of the best ones of the time. It was, it made an impression on me. So
up until this evening, when your dad brought Stanton Friedman home, and I'm imagining things started to change in a way, what were your thoughts, if at all, about UFOs, flying saucers, beings from other planets visiting Earth? Was it something you thought about or took seriously, or it was just, whatever?
Yeah, it was, my dad was into it, and so forth. And I had a passing interest in college. And one time I was driving home from college by Vandenberg Air Force Base, which you mentioned in the intro, or the tribute really, and saw a light dancing around and pulled over my car, got my binoculars out and looked at it for a little bit. And then, went home and wrote up a MUFON report. It lasted like a few, 3 or 4 minutes on the side of the road, cars buzzing by. But then I sort of ignored it all throughout my career. It wasn't until the late 80s or so that I started to go to MUFON conferences. And then in early 1994, when the Special Operations Manual, Extraterrestrial Entities, Technology, Recovery, and Disposal was leaked by Don Berliner, or to Don Berliner, and my father retyped it all, that we got fully engaged. And then the Tim Cooper trove of some of the Majestic documents.
And we're going to come back to that in a moment, but let's now go back to that night when you're 15 years old. Did your dad normally bring home guests for dinner from work unannounced or from wherever?
No. No, it was like, well, Stan was actually, I think, just a newly hired employee working for my dad at
oh my gosh,
on this Douglas private internal R&D program called Bitter. I mean, Boys in the Back Room, which was their effort on anti-gravity and gravity control. But it was a little broader than that. They looked at abductions. They looked at the scientific work of Paul Hill and at NASA at the time. I remember going out into the desert out by Joshua Tree to a little tiny cinder block house with my dad and my mom. And I don't think my sister went. And some of his scientist guys had magnetometers out there with strip chart recorders. And we were trying to, see if we could get anomalous magnetic readings from passing flying saucers.
Wow.
But nothing happened.
About how old were you when this happened?
Well, that maybe, this may have been predated it. No, I think it was about the same time, 15, 16 or something like that, So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's not a normal childhood moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose.
Well, in your childhood.
Yeah.
I had not realized those were the very specific circumstances which first brought your dad and Stan together. Amazing.
Yeah, well, Stan, I mean, my dad hired Stan to work on this program as a nuclear physicist, and several other people as well. He had a little 6-man team with $500,000, which is like $5 million today, trying to change the speed of light with Michelson-Morley interferometer and high magnetic fields. And I actually engaged in that process pretty thoroughly in like 1974. I did a senior project in physics and sort of recreated that and won first prize in the Orange County Science Fair.
I'll be damned.
So yeah, that was fun. So I became re-immersed with, well, what were you trying to learn? How were you trying to measure this speed of light? How were we trying to change gravity? And the whole subject of gravity, which I can spend a lot of time on, is I think, in my opinion, one of the great secrets that's been cracked and has been hidden to the great detriment of humanity. But that I can get more on my soapbox on that.
We've known each other for a lot of years, and I still remember that kind of adventure we had in St. Louis, chasing down a particular case.
Oh, yeah.
But also spending time at the legendary National Military Archives. The facility is a jaw-dropping experience in terms of the sweep of the information. And at what point did this interest become something more of an interest, and I'm particularly curious to know if at some point your father said in so many words to you, this is not something, and my work involved in this is not something to just share with people. It's, it's a situation.
I think
That
there's
the import or the impact or the seriousness and the implications of this work really hit, because you're a very analytical person,
right. Yeah, it's a good question. I think the real import was when we started to get a lot of the Majestic documents. I mean, the Special Operations Manual was stunningly detailed, and the most authentic one, how do you cover up the scene? Where do you take the bodies? What's the description of type 1 and type 2 EVEs? And then the interplanetary phenomenon unit documents. It was the breadth of some 3,500 pages, some original, some photocopies of the Majestic documents that was overwhelmingly real for me and my father. And so I recognized the import of it right away and said, this is cool. I can do this. And that's sort of what it is. I guess one thing I wanted to make sure to clarify for the audience is that my father, working at Douglas, and Douglas basically internal research and development, never had access to any classified data or information about crash saucers. It was all physicists saying, well, we know they're not ours, and who's going to figure out how they work? Is it going to be Lockheed or somebody else before us? And it was a competitive driven management decision to do that work. But I think Lockheed had already figured it out and had it hidden. But anyway.
Ryan, to be so committed to the subject that you take on, even if you have a good business sense, that you take on a huge project repeatedly, a lot of the work thankless, really for the betterment of disseminating information, which was the Crash Retrieval Conference that you ran. It was your baby.
Yeah.
7 years in a row. I remember it in great part because I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak 6 of the times, and because in the world of conferences, the mechanics, like any event, you want to go professionally, and you can have great quality people, but if it's really, hiccuping along and there are technical problems, it informs, your take on the event. Your conference was always so well run, we all know that a lot of work goes into a really successful dinner party, but the evening passes, without stress, and everything is right where it should be at the right time. That commitment, surely you couldn't do that and, pay all your bills doing it. It's a labor of love, and the people that assisted you, the facility. Talk about the conference a bit, why you even decided to do it.
Yeah, I mean, why did I decide to do it? Yeah. I think
while we're talking race, you can show some of the covers of some of the proceedings, and the proceedings were, in terms of quality, presentation, professionalism, equivalent certainly of the MUFON Symposium proceedings, absolutely first rate.
I think what motivated me was my frustration in going to MUFON conferences.
Yeah.
And I went to, I've probably been to 10 or 15 by then. And that was the problem, is that I didn't like what they're focused on, or their speakers, or the presentations. And I mean, there were some good ones and some bad ones. And I thought, by all means, I can do a better job than this. And so I guess it was out of just frustration that I decided to do the first one. And then once I did the first one and it was a success, and I made money, and things didn't blow up. I I decided to write the book Majic Eyes Only, the first edition in 2005, and it had 74 UFO crash retrieval events documented. One of the people that participated said, "Well, aren't you going to run out of crashes here quickly?" But there's only a few in 2003 or whatever. There's Roswell and Kecksburg and Shag Harbor and just a few. And I said, no, there's lots. And so I wrote that book. And I don't know, it's just sort of one of those things where you feel the energy, you want to do it, and you go. And it didn't take long. It was like my experience with the AI ufologist, artificial intelligence ufologist last November, is that, I asked it one question and the answer was so good that I answered another 30 questions. And in 2 days I was done with the book. I mean, it was just like, it's more complicated than that, but it was, if it feels good, I just keep going.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like work. It feels like joy.
Well, that really is the definition of the kind of work everybody longs to have, work that they are genuinely driven to want to do and engage in. I want to take a few minutes to talk about MJ12, the documents, timing, and why, after all these years, and they broke in the public realm in the summer of 1987. And it seems that we have had an ongoing argument about their authenticity, reality, pedigree, provenance ever since.
Sure.
So let's begin at the beginning. The so-called Eisenhower briefing documents, which I think is just, in a way, one of the seminal documents in American history. It's an 8-page memorandum to President-elect Eisenhower from President Truman and his team, very simply discussing in almost bullet point fashion, but totally appropriate to the nuance, the wording, the typewriters used, the forms, the individuals involved as the likely individuals who would have been involved. Right. And, who knows how many of hundreds of thousands of hours people in the community have spent collectively chasing it down together or on their own. Right. I remember feeling somewhat insider-ish because Stan Friedman had sent me, and it's the 8-page briefing document, and a very terse, simple letter purporting to be from President Truman to the first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, asking him in so many words to get cracking on his mission and prioritize it to the extent of everything else. These 9 pages, for me, are absolutely as real as they can be. In fact, in these digital days, a lot of folks can't even conceive of beginning your work in an analog reality.
Typewriter.
You see behind me on that side, a series of notebooks. Some of them go back to the later 70s, and they're kind of the textbooks I created for myself because I didn't go to a UFO conference for 6 years from the time my childhood memory of my sighting with my sister returned. Didn't know that there were ufologists, was completely a newie. And a lot of it is cut and pasted, Xerox from one source or another. And one whole notebook is MJ12 members. Another one focuses on Forrestal and Bush. And it was quite a self-education. And then what we learned in the community was there was other documents purporting to be MJ12 related. We do know, beyond, I think, any reasonable doubt, even for the most arch skeptic, that MJ12 as a special study group with a classified purpose existed, and that's attested to, and among other real-world documentation, by the Cutler Memorandums of 1952, discussing MJ12, but
54.
giving, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like any independent researcher, I started to learn that there was this guy named Timothy Cooper who had connected with you and your dad, and he had his own backstory on how he got access to these materials. And it's so easy. And now here we are, you know, in a golden age of conspiracy and belief without authenticity necessarily.
Yeah.
And the debate is still raging. So, and Stanton Friedman, of course, felt that the Eisenhower briefing documents were absolutely authentic, but separated from you and your dad on many, if not most, of the other documents. So let's kind of come back into that as a point of discussion. When did you first hear or see, or your dad, to the best of your knowledge, anything about this Eisenhower briefing document?
Well, I like you, just sort of got exposed to the Eisenhower briefing document when it happened in I think it was 84 or 87.
87. Yeah.
So yeah, and so that was I didn't pay much attention to it. My dad later on had several other sources of that same document come into his purview, and I sort of, you know, I didn't spend a lot of time with the Eisenhower briefing document. It was, I mean, as you mentioned, the people are right and the style is right, and the only authenticity adder that I could have is the fact that there were some other independent sources that seem to be different photocopies of it, and then you have the whole FBI analysis saying that it's bogus because they couldn't find anybody in the intelligence community to say they lost it, which is just like,
that was actually entertaining. You know,
but I guess the key thing I want to highlight to the audience really is that there are 7 different sources of Majestic documents spanning some 18, 19 years. And there's 3,500 pages, some originals, like the Bowen manuscript, and some are photocopies, and some are undeveloped film that was developed, like the Eisenhower briefing document and the Special Operations Manual. So there's lots of different diverse sources, and from the notion of espionage or faking things like this, there's just like, it's so illogical to believe that you can successfully influence the Russian or the Chinese or so forth with this cadre of bad documents. I mean, they're not, the provenance is not clean, and there's issues here and there. There's not enough information to check, and all to what end? I mean, you know, if I was a Russian, Chinese, French, whatever spy, and the Eisenhower briefing document came out and said, well, you know, or the other Majestic documents, we need to have like another 10 people try to penetrate Area 51. We need to get more spies into the CIA that know what's going on with this. I mean, this is not what counterintelligence wants in the CIA. And so I just think that it's all sort of a genuine leaking. And that was sort of a long-winded answer, and maybe a little.
No, long-winded answers are wonderful.
Right.
We have the time and the wind. Let me play devil's advocate and come at this from a slightly different angle, which is, we know there are people in officialdom whose minds are geared to chronicle, observe, provocate, create a situation, and then study it for the purpose of studying it because the government's paying them money to study it. Let's just say that a very well-mounted, well-funded effort to create this fake history of alleged documents, even to the point of using old onion skin paper that, was made in 1947, but was still in the box, having the right rubber stamps. Well, I'm already realizing, I have problems putting my thesis forward. The idea, though, that it might have not really been an effort at all directed at fooling intelligence communities in other countries, but to sell the so-called UFO community this wonderful sweep and total fake history, and then expose it, making us all, in their minds, look like fools. Again, it's ludicrous on a certain level, but there are people in government and intelligence and military who spend their times on ludicrous activities to create a false situation. And any thoughts about that? Do you think there's...
Sure. I think that, well, let's see. Fundamentally, they don't want to attract foreign intelligence. I think that the ufology community is sort of a so what, we don't care. They don't have any credibility, and they don't have any money. And so they're nothing really to worry about in being exposed. And they certainly can't seem to pull whistleblowers out of our organizations to expose our inner workings. So I just think that it's kind of egotistical to think that they even would care about ufology or all of us out here. And it's the hubris of their or the MJ12 control group, that they know best, that the 1,000 cloistered scientists working underground on reverse engineering alien spacecraft are better than the millions or tens or hundreds of millions of scientists and engineers across the world that could help and that could make a difference. And if they managed it properly, they might say, well, we leaked it out here and there. We had some corporations. It's just, there's hell to pay no matter what. If they tell the truth, how much they tell, whatever, now or 50 years from now, it's going to suck. And that's the problem.
While you're speaking, I'm thinking, the second half of the show, I'm going to pull out your books, the MJ12 documents, the manual, and we'll talk about them together. But what's been said aside, one of the things that began to really fascinate me as I began to read through that compendium, a very small percentage, of course, but it's a good sized book filled with reproductions of these documents, scans. And we have a number of either extremely important historical figures who might well have figured into this story, if indeed it's real, as I think you and I agree. Two of them, I think our viewers and listeners will probably be familiar with their names. One has gotten a certain amount of extra publicity fairly recently, Robert Oppenheimer. At the other, a gentleman named Albert Einstein.
Right.
Two great intellects to whom English was a second language. And not that any of us who purport to speak it, somewhat intelligently, aren't prone to quirks in the way we write and speak. If you really strive to keep your punctuation first rate, a semicolon instead of a colon in one place.
Well, it's,
or an inverted preposition or something. Yeah. And again, if English is a second language, sometimes these things happen more unconsciously, and it just is ingrained. And reading some of the manuscript copy purported to be from Oppenheimer, and
Right.
from
Einstein. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
drove me into their other writing to get a sense of the rhythm. And, son of a gun, either it is what it is, or, and I don't dismiss this, this is not something that was typed up in somebody's basement by, a prankster. There
Right.
was a
Yeah.
great deal of study, which is, for me, extremely interesting
Yeah.
in one-dimensional way. And that we do stuff like this to create totally false impressions.
Mm-hmm.
But I still reflect back on it sometimes, and watching the movie this summer that was such a blockbuster and that so many people went out to see on Oppenheimer. I was a little disappointed, only in that, number one, I expected it to be even better than it was, and that I thought just they did not deal even cursorily respectfully and appropriately to a film structure with what the hell was left in the aftermath on the ground in Japan. And I thought, even, for some parting shots from documentaries, let's not
Yeah.
keep this.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they could
Anyway,
have. Yeah. Well,
it
it's an interesting. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the famous Einstein-Oppenheimer document from the Office of Research and Development, OSD. And this has been. It's one of the only documents that is more of a think piece and not a military style document. And it asks the questions of, well, why are they here? Can they settle on planet Earth? What does international law tell me about the ability of aliens to be here? And fundamentally, we had to do a lot of research on this particular document. And one of the things that we did is we hired Dr. Carol Chowsky, who's a forensic linguistics person. And it's $500 an hour paying for lawyers who show up in court and testify. But she looked at the document, and we had to supply example writings from Einstein, from Oppenheimer, and from Tim Cooper, which is where it came.
For goodness sakes,
Very
good.
We had all three of those. And we fed it to her, and she ran it through her computer algorithm and so forth, and concluded that, nope, Tim Cooper did not use the right adverbial clauses, the hyphenations, on and on. So the fingerprinting of his language style was not it. And the fingerprinting of Oppenheimer's was not it. It was clearly Einstein, and she was like 97% confident that it was Einstein that wrote it, and not Oppenheimer. And then also, what's, I guess, critical about this document is, well, God, I've lost the thought. But the forensics was really good in pinpointing the fact that it was Einstein that wrote it. And even some of the German words, res nullius and res cumus. Oh, it was the concept of, there was misspellings in it. There was they misspelled celestial, I don't know how many times. And it's a fake because they misspelled celestial. And so then what you have to think about is, well, did Einstein dictate this in German to his secretary or in English, who was typing it on a typewriter? And that word may be not familiar. She was consistent in her misspelling,
or that she habitually spelled that word.
It was most likely a she. So that was the other thing, is that's the other twist, is that this was, it's dictation in German into English as well. But we pulled writings and draft documents within a year of when this was dated in June of 47 to use for Carol Chowsky for authentication. So if you just step back and say, well, that one's real, you're just reading it, it's a very fascinating concept in that why in the world would they be asking Einstein or Oppenheimer, and even signed by Van Bush? He says on the back, I tend to agree, signs invented by Bush, or VB, his so it's fascinating to think, well, what in June of 47 are they doing, thinking about, should aliens land here? How would they live here? How does international law treat an alien presence? So they clearly had some evidence to say that, they had Roswell, obviously, but, and Cape Girardeau and other crashes and events all around the world before then.
Ryan, you mentioned that Timothy Cooper was one of 7 sources, independent, seemingly separate, not connected sources. Can you tell us anything about these other 6 sources?
Oh, sure. Well, why don't we start with the Special Operations Manual, for example. It was mailed from
Race, if you can find the Special Operations Manual, it's kind of got a tan cover, very low key. It says SOM. There you go. Continue along, Ryan.
So this was mailed from La Crosse, Wisconsin, to Don Berliner, who was an Aviation Week and space reporter in Washington, D.C. And it was postmarked La Crosse, Wisconsin. And on the and it was right about the time, within like a few days of or during the Oshkosh fly-in air show. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
it's a big one.
It's the biggest experimental fly-in show in the world.
Wow.
Where, thousands of airplanes fly into
Oshkosh,
and they all talk about airplanes, and I think that's where the film got dropped off and mailed from there. But inside the first cover, this is sort of going to the provenance issue of where the sourcing is. On the inside flap of the document is it's stamped Kirkland Air Force Base Unit KB-88. And let's see if I have that.
Yeah, what do we know about Unit KB-88?
Well, I don't know anything about Unit KB-88, but I do know that Kirkland Air Force Base and New Mex, MEX. So they use the correct abbreviation, not NM for New Mexico, but N.MEX. So it was before the postal system had upgraded to 2-letter abbreviations. Zip code, right. So that was correct, and fascinating. Then when I talked to the facilities manager at Kirkland Air Force Base, he said, well, there is a building 21. It's over here. And it's a cinder block building and, small. So I definitely confirmed that. And then on the inside page of the manual is the change control page, which has the initials of the officers that swapped out various pages as time went on. It's sort of a field manual. I think it went out with various recovery teams. And they're JRT and EWL. And so I went to the Albuquerque phone book and found the JRT and EWL in the phone book, a captain and a lieutenant who happened to live on Perimeter Road on Kirkland Air Force Base, like 4 houses from each other. And so you go, bingo, there we go. These people are real. The initials are real. The building's real. And so that was one provenance-oriented, source-oriented discussion around a Majestic document.
When you first learned about Majestic 12, again, your focus is more, has been up until this point, more science, engineering, business than history, but you're certainly a student of post-war history, like most of us are. Was there a point in going through the documents that were starting to come at you where you were holding an original? Big difference from a Xerox piece of paper, perhaps with the rubber stamp, perhaps with a signature, a smear, some pen indication or whatever, where something more happened. I say this in part because one of the things I want to talk with you about is your involvement, interest in, and your use of remote viewing. Again, you are, for me, kind of a bellwether in that I know I can count on you to be logical and, think clearly about subjects that muddle people's minds to a great degree. But there is that, there's a romantic aspect to this work that I think in the current climate, post the New York Times, December 2017, the BC and AD of, our post-ridicule era, that everything can coalesce in a real piece of paper, or if we had an artifact or, an absolutely gilt-edged piece of metal that, yes, this is a carburetor from this model of UFO.
Right.
But I know that feeling handling, old letters and documents, and it can be very evocative. Again, originals is very different than a Xerox. Any memory come to mind relative to that?
Well, yeah, I mean the Bowen manuscript, Vernon Bowen, there was just some 300 pages of original typed manuscript that was supplied to Tim Cooper, postmarked Fort Meade, Freedom of Information Act office. And this particular manual, or it's not a manual, it's a manuscript, was typed by Vernon Bowen, which was he wrote children's books and was a PR publicist in New York, and he went to the New York Public Library in the 50s and late 50s and sort of collected UFO sightings and encounters and typed them up into this manuscript and submitted it to the Air Force. We don't know quite why, to say, do you have any concerns or objections to me, publishing this? And he never got it back. It just went away, and he followed up and sorry. and then it comes back 40 years later out of Fort Meade. And Fort Meade is where a lot of this National Archives vaults are, and there's declassifiers out there. And it comes back and it's original. So what's interesting is the Air Force chapter is all stamped top secret Majic MJ12, top secret Majic, MAJIC, military assessment of the Joint Intelligence Committee. And that was original, with pen marks and pencil marks and Vannevar Bush's notes and all this, which you could take to forensic. We took it to Spec and Forensic Laboratories, and they punched out little holes and did liquid chromatography on the inks and said, oh yeah, well, this is, the pencil is pre 1970 and the ink is old, and we can't pinpoint this exact ink, the top secret ink, because you don't have other examples or exemplars to compare to. Short of going to the National Archives and finding an original and then secretly punching a little hole out of it, which they would go bananas over.
A perfect note to go out on. This is Peter Robbins. My special guest tonight is Ryan Wood, and we will be back in 4 minutes. Stay with us.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts. We've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Klaatu will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com.
The UnX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UnX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
And welcome back. This is Peter Robbins, special guest, Ryan Wood, and thumbing through the Majestic Documents. Absolutely fascinating. It's so much raw data. Well, it's American history in a form that we just really haven't been exposed to in our formal education. And also, again, highly controversial. A lot of people attacked this when it came out. The fact that it was retyped, so to say, was held against it. And when Ryan returns, I want to pick up with him on where this came from and what it actually covers. Also, Ryan's newest book, The AI Ufologist, and his original book, still very compelling reading, Majic Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. Race, do we know where Ryan is at the moment? And there he is, as if by wizardry. Again, reading through these documents, even just flipping through them, stuff that catches your attention. This is some of the most loaded. The implications of a popular reading of this book, I just can't even imagine. And I'd like to know what's changed for you, either personally or in terms of your perspective, with this shift in attitude of certain people in government, and certainly increasingly the general public at large, away from 70 years of entrenched ridicule, which worked so brilliantly. Just wink, wink, nudge, nudge, flying saucers and little green men, to all of a sudden it goes through a process of legitimization. I personally, I don't, a lot of people kind of credit the two articles, and very important articles, gosh knows, by the great Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal and Helene Cooper in December 16th or 17th, 2017 Sunday issue of the Times, beginning on the front page, that marked the transition. And again, this attitude, I don't know about you, but there have been so many times over the years where it seemed like something was about to change. And, you know, we all want things to change for a more healthy, open attitude about this subject, as well as what the hell is going on, really. That it took me almost a year to realize that the other shoe wasn't going to fall. The thing actually had started to change. And you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's so interesting. You know, it's still a kabuki show and a soap opera. And so far, it's given us a certain amount of drama, but hasn't taken us to a new place. But it's certainly better than where we were. Right.
Well, I agree. I credit Leslie Kean's work and Grush to come out and be the whistleblower. And I think having the congressional testimony was pivotal. Now House of Representative members, in some of them in a classified SCI-F, special compartmentalized information facility, where they heard a top secret code word situation where Grush said, hey, you know, these are the corporations that are involved. These are the people that are involved. These are the ones that are cooperative. These are the people that aren't cooperative. I mean, that was his testimony before Congress. He didn't say who they were, but, you know, the usual suspects of Boeing and Lockheed and Rand and Sperry and Carlyle Group and Aerospace Corporation and so forth, EG&G. And so you can make a list of all those people. And this is good, but he knocked on the door and was denied access to the Crash Retrieval program. He was turned away. And then, you know, 6 months later, they write this dumb report, which is probably as embarrassing as the original crash test dummies Roswell report, that we all saw, and they denied it all. So it's like I think that they're just managing what they can for the control group is, and Congress is more excited, I guess, or certain members of Congress. But I suspect that with the election and the Biden administration, that nothing's really going to happen until after the election, and I. When you talk about disclosure, and I applaud Steve Bassett and all the people that worked long and hard on trying to nurture that and squeeze it out of the government. But I just am skeptical that there's sort of 2 points of disclosure. There's when the ETs say, hello, we're here, we've been around, and make it public. That I predict is 2050, 2060. And when the U.S. government or another government like China or something says, hey, we got crash saucers and alien bodies. So that I don't think it's going to happen either. And so that's sort of, I'm kind of conservative on that, but they need to keep trying. I mean, I was, 18 years ahead of the time with the crash retrievals, and finally it got validated, but we didn't get the answer. It's such a complicated thing, well, yeah, we have crashed hardware. Well, okay, can you show me a body? Well, yeah, I can, but can I have a blood sample? Well, no. Have you made any biological weapons with the blood sample? I can't tell you that. Have you figured out anti-gravity? Well, we really can't discuss technological stuff like that. Well, why not? Well, who were the people that worked on it? You can see the rabbit hole.
Ryan, the current state of the world of ufologists, there are a core of old school plotting, not interested in a great deal of the spotlight, just doing their work. And there's also what has become kind of an industry. There are so many interesting, I would say, competitive for listeners and viewers, programs that are somewhat like this in terms of covering UFOs, the paranormal, or for me, people living really interesting, contributing, and maybe somewhat unusual lives, that I'm sure that there are people who have higher profiles than us who would resent your attempting to reach out to certain people in the public political realm and saying, I'd like to put at your disposal this extraordinary archive, a true part of American history, and here's a sampling of it, by saying, oh my God, if they start to believe MJ-12, we all know that's nonsense, or it's going to get discredited, that would be inappropriate, and they need to stay focused where they are. It seems to me this would be something worthy of their reading time, even if they want to see, in some existential way, what a absolutely first-rate deception, or, which is, again, interesting in itself. But has anybody reached out to you, or have you reached out to anyone with the thought of the climate has changed since these were published, since you first started to be associated with them? Any thoughts on where you're going to go, if you have a thought in mind, in moving these more into the public realm?
Well, I mean, I thought the first thing to do was to update my book, Majic Eyes Only, to have now 104 crash retrieval cases rather than 74 from around the world. So that was the first thing. And then I sent it to a lot of members of Congress and sort of seeded it with various people, and did my best to sort of, raise my hand and say, if you want an expert in crash retrievals to testify before Congress, I'll do it. So, that would, I think that would help educate more people. But might say to the congressman, well, do you have a top secret clearance? Well, yeah, I do. Do you have a Q clearance? Well, no, I don't. Do you have an Umbra clearance? No, I don't. Do you have a moon dust clearance? No, I don't. Do you have an M clearance? No, I don't. So go get those, and then let's talk again. Or if you really want to solve the cover-up, dear Congress, do you want to solve the cover-up? Give me 5 FBI agents in 3 months and unfettered access, and I will go find the people and find the archives, put them under oath. You lie to an FBI agent, you go to jail, or and it isn't that difficult to go to where the data is. And fun. I like the idea of pulling it out of the archives, actually, where nobody's going to refute the fact that, hey, you pulled these top secret documents that out of the archives that talk about aliens, and people are going to say, well, that's credibility. They're not faked; they're real, and we may not be able to interview the people that are listed in the documents, but I think that's one way to really move the needle forward, besides whistleblowers.
And without, I should remind folks, without any of those security clearances, you are authorized to go right to the majesticdocuments.com and purchase copies without any clearance necessary.
Right.
FBI be damned.
Right. Or Amazon, it's like it's all
no clearance on Amazon needed either.
Right.
The irony, though, and it was something that came to my attention in the 70s when I was first getting involved in this, and my first mentor, a retired staff officer of the Hungarian Royal Army, Koman von Kavetsky, a wonderful guy and a great teacher for me, when he actually gave me my first Xerox copies of authentically declassified documents. In their case, of course, as you know, the process back in the day was, we'll review it every 3 years, and after 12 years, I think, if it doesn't seem to be a risk for national security, we're not going to shout it, to the sky. We will quietly put it in a filing cabinet in the National Archives where somebody may or may not find it. And I remember traveling back from Queens, New York, where Coleman lived, to Chinatown in Lower Manhattan on the subway. I was teaching school at the time, lower school art, first, second, and third grade. What an amazing experience. And I had a briefcase. And thinking, I had, among other things, the original Hoover communications from like July 5th or something, 1947, signed off by him and Clive Tolson, and thinking, I get it. This is real. And the FBI and other officialdom strategy is, you can't deny it, but you don't have to acknowledge it, and you can basically ignore. But this is real. If this appeared on the cover of the Daily News tomorrow, and the Times and the Post and papers around the world, things could change. This is real. If these people around me on the subway knew what I had in this bag, now, of course, everybody's got a huge archive of documents, and it's just de rigueur, and they know it's the things, how quickly we take things for granted, or just kind of incorporate them into our world-weary, sophisticated point of view. But I still remember feeling quite electrified by these things. And to think of, again, the archive that you guys are sitting on. Let's talk a bit about.
I want Taylor Swift. I want Taylor Swift to tweet out, Majestic Documents. You got 100 million followers or something like that. We'd crack this thing in no time.
You may, if this works out for you and the family, don't forget me and that you had the chance to break this, because who knows?
Yeah.
Although I'm willing to bet hard cash, Taylor Swift is not watching or listening to this show right now. Somebody who is absolutely crazy about her is, and needs to bring this to her attention. Although all you need to do is put together a package of the materials that you've published, a nice cover note. All of your children are fans, I hope. If not, make them fans quickly. There's something very likable.
Yeah.
And, find an address. I'm sure she is famous for seeming to pay attention to folks that care about her music, and she seems like an alti. So let's take this bit of humor and amp it up a bit. Yeah, if she started, all she needs to do is write a song called Majestic 12, and the rest is, as they say, history. We're off on a digression here, but we're dealing with an essential force in the universe, a 6-foot-tall blonde woman who's a billionaire, and a very nice person. It's a win-win situation.
It's better than Elon Musk.
I agree. This, again, I was aware of some of the material in this before you and your dad published it, but I will say it again.
The SOM1-01,
This particular booklet, and it's small, is essential reading, I think. And it's almost as if, every longing or thought that you may have had about, surely somewhere, there has to be some written out text for folks that are involved in this above top secret work. And what does it actually say? And of course, it's wonderfully coldly bureaucratic in its working, in its, writing. Of course, they're not going to be emotional, although there's every reason to be.
Right. I mean, you don't train a Navy SEAL team to be emotional.
And again, at the bottom of every page, top secret / Majic Eyes Only, reproduction any form is forbidden by federal law. But of course, the catch-22 here is no one in any remote capacity, even within an historical division of an established American service branch or intelligence community, is going to say anything about your not being able to do with this material what you want, or what any of us want, because it's too highly classified to admit that it's real, which is existentially entertaining.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. And the contents of the manual is, what are the EBEs like, type 1 and type 2? Where do you ship the bodies and the parts? How do you do the cover stories? What's the purpose of the manual? There's a identification section for, there's references in the back. It's sort of a field manual, a briefing manual, so to speak, for the red teams or blue teams that would go out and recover crash saucers in that time frame. And so that's sort of the content. And after you read the content, you go, oh my God, is this true? And so then you ask the question, well, how do I know this document's authentic? And so then you go into the authenticity thing, and then you start looking at the war seal, was it used, or the technical manual in the front, identifications, and
there must be 10,000 or some thousands of technical manuals for everything from, the M1 to a battleship. And it's another reason why it's almost shocking to see that exact same language applied to a subject that kind of redefines the term exotic. There are parts of it that's almost like if you're a long-haul truck driver and you bring a delivery several thousand miles and you've got to get the right paperwork signed before turning over your cargo. This is the equivalent. And I just cracked it open to a section here called non-living organisms. Ideally, retrieval for scientific study of cadavers and other biological remains will be carried out by medical personnel familiar with this type of procedure. Because of security considerations, such collection may need to be done by non-medical personnel. This section will provide guidance for retrieval, preservation, and removal of cadavers and remains in the field, which is just what you want to do, get those remains out of the field.
Right, I know, but lots of people have, died pulling it out. I mean, there's other Majestic Documents that said some of the Sandia Engineering District technicians who recovered parts of the Roswell died of profuse bleeding in the nose and mouth, sort of like Ebola. And so this is probably one of the reasons why they did a manual like this, or did better precautions and better training, and focused on how to do a better job of crash retrievals and retrieval processes. One of the big authenticity elements of it, and sort of, is we found Robert McCarter, who was a recently retired government printing manual expert. So he wrote the style manual for government printing. And these are big, thick books. You'd think, it's no big deal to have a government printing manual. But so my dad and I went to his house in Virginia, and we were sitting at this little card table. They had it out. He had his loop out, and we slid the original negatives across the table to him, the first page. And he looked at the first page and said, from the title of this, I think it'd be a fake. And then he started flipped through the pages and said, well, all the formatting is correct, and it follows the style manual. But now the Z is raised across the line as an artifact of the hot lead printing press in synchronizer. And he said, from that subtlety alone, I guarantee you it's real. And it's a hot lead printing press. And furthermore, I think the CIA printed it down on 10th Street over here, in one of their cages. So this guy spent his entire life managing government printing and hot lead printing presses, and it was intimately familiar with the whole arc of printing, hot lead printing.
What a great idea to contact him.
Right. It was fun. I mean, that was one of the times that my dad and I were doing it together. And that's what made it fun, or the investigations fun. Yeah. Just like we're off in the middle of Tennessee, I think, looking for an alleged meteor, flying saucer. And I'll never forget being confronted by these men in a truck who had just been working in like a flour mill, and they had white all over their faces. Do you remember that? It was like,
oh my gosh, I haven't thought of that since. Well,
yeah,
I'll be damned.
Yeah, so I remember that, but that was fun. It was just, it's typical of a crash retrieval investigation. Precisely where did it happen? Precisely when did it happen? Can you find newspaper articles or witnesses? And so.
The National Military Archives is not in St. Louis. It's in, it might as well be like a huge Hilton hotel complex in the middle of nowhere in terms of where it's set up. But we went through some really rural territory in our hunt, in our search there. Right now, what do you feel is the major issues in getting the camel through the eye of the needle, so to say? Yes, it will be terribly embarrassing to the United States government as an institution to have to, if they ever have the chutzpah to do it, to say, we've been lying, we've always been lying about it. It really comes down to a bunch of guys in 1947 who couldn't predict what was going to happen if the truth, or what seemed to be the truth, came out. So we just institutionalized a cover-up. Sorry, but we didn't know what else to do. And it wasn't us anyway, it was them. But we're not alone, and we're not exactly sure what we think we're dealing with a myriad.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to put the camel through the needle. And one of the things that I did in trying to address that problem is create the AI Ufologist, which answers the 30 big questions of ufology, from what's their agenda, to why do they abduct humans, to how do you marry the challenge of transparency and disclosure, which is sort of the question you asked, Peter. Is this tug of war between the two aspects, and what's the function of MJ12? Well, why do they keep it secret? I do ask questions like, well, what are crop circles all about? What is the technology there? I try to answer the core questions that would do a better, create a roadmap for how they could sort of tell the truth, or come out of the closet, so to speak. A little mini business plan, so to speak.
Yeah. This is actually very easy to read in one sitting.
Yeah.
It's meant to address these bullet point questions. It's
Right.
not, a deep treatise, but it hits all the notes. And, one can, it also gives you ideas to bounce off of. It's good for, I think, renewing some of the questions that veterans may have, but a book that will address questions that folks who are newer to the subject have about these basic things that we still struggle with, that have as much to do with human behavior, the need to hide what we don't understand, fear of the unknown. And if you can't be in control, at least hold on to that illusion of control. Wilhelm Reich wrote about this very eloquently in 1956 and 55 in terms of nailing that the character type of somebody who is career military and proud and patriotic, and then finds that their cutting edge technology is a joke compared to what they're facing here. But you can't, like the title of the Georgina Bruni wonderful study, frustrating but very powerful study on the Rendlesham event, you can't tell the people. And that's a direct quote from Margaret Thatcher. I'm wondering sometimes if we will just continue to go on in this prolonged, Indonesian shadow puppet show of things behind the screen that are keeping us engaged, but this is the way it goes. This is the brave new world. Or that something, maybe it might be equivalent to, say, the Pentagon Papers. That may ring bells for some people.
Oh, yeah.
A dump of credible information, legal or not, from a credible person willing to take the risk of doing it. And then there's the wild card of, first, when we say them, I think, unless you're married to a belief that it's this particular group or that that we're dealing with a myriad of other intelligences. And last year's MUFON symposium, the driving question was friend or foe. And I remember as moderator at a point having the fun of saying, I can resolve this right now. Are we talking about the good ones or the bad ones? And I got a laugh. And I think those terms are ridiculous. Anyway, they're doing what they're doing. And the euphemism when things began in the 70s regarding studying the abduction phenomena was they're experimenting, kind of Frankensteinish sort of word.
Right.
As opposed to there's a program in effect. And they are the ones that are running it, that know why they're doing it, that are looking for certain results. They're probably not going to share them with us overtly when they do it, but my sister's childhood way of remembering her experience on board, in this had to be like at least 15 years before the term gray entered the lexicon, it was like being in a well-run dentist's office. And I always thought
Yeah. Okay.
maybe that has something to do with it's just one of possible presenting signs, and most people just aren't fans of going to the dentist. They know it may hurt or cost money, whatever, but it struck a note, and it was as good a description of a procedure as opposed to an adventure, or let's experiment and see if we can figure out something new on this particular, specimen that we picked up.
I think when I step back and think about the big picture, I think that, when will the ETs choose to either make the government tell the truth or show up themselves?
Right. And that was my final point. Are they going to be the ones to disclose? And I've mentioned
I think they're the people driving the whole thing. And so the criteria in my mind for them to show up are, have you started to feed your entire world? Have you started to reduce man's inhumanity to man, no wars, etc.? Have you gotten rid of your nukes, or the vast majority of them? And you basically need to take the population up to a much higher level. I mean, we're at 8 billion now, and there's 3 billion that are in the shithole and frustrated as hell and unhappy and barely surviving. And when we do that, then they might show up. Now, the only way to do that, in my mind, is either with fusion, low-cost portable fusion that allows you to democratize energy and make it ubiquitous. So you can take water out of the air, you can desalinate salt water, you can grow food, you got light, you got electricity. You completely recalibrate the whole climate system and all of it with low-cost energy, not just the same old cost structures. You got to be 10 or 100 times cheaper, or you got to do it with anti-gravity, which accomplishes the same thing, except is potentially more dicey, maybe. But the point is, if we clean up the planet, upgrade the humanity, and improve the situation, and the faster we do that, the faster the ETs are going to show up. Because then we're going to...
that there are folks that it's not that they're unconcerned with the deterioration of our environment, but some of them may simply feel, look, I'm just one person here, I'm an older person, or I'm just a bug on the wall of the cosmos here, and I'll be gone at some point, and leave me with my gasoline powered vehicle and my bike, because that's all I have is my heritage, and you guys who are younger will take care of it and clean it up. But we're fast approaching, if we haven't already gone there, a point of no return, and after which we just either drift toward a Brave New World, or some cross between Mad Max and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We just have no.
Yeah.
And I think there is an increasing longing in this current climate of thinking, where my belief, even if it's really wild and off the rails, it deserves as much attention and respect as your actual knowledge. Well, no, it doesn't. But I can't say that without offending you or making it sound like, I'm looking down or whatever. But we are dealing with folks who, and Jung wrote about this longing to have this new pantheon of gods from space or gods of technology to help us out of this situation that we have created. We're old enough to remember as kids anyway, that there came a point, I remember it was discussed at the family dinner table, where the Earth was soon going to have 1 billion people on it. It
Right.
never happened before. I think I was in junior high school, but it was 1 billion people. Like, that's either too much. And now, of course, think about the exponential growth, and
Yep.
without, what used to be called family planning, and now is, seen as the ultimate try to control of the individual. Unless, you make your own decisions about the size of your family, as opposed to, the state telling you. But we are going to hell on a handrail. And I wonder if they have certain rules by which they will not initiate, as opposed, unless it's maybe perhaps an absolutely dire situation, a nuclear weapon in flight that was set off by accident that needs to be,
I don't think they can even intervene then. It's like, I still think there might be 2 or 3 nukes that go off in the Middle East, and the world will survive that. But maybe that would be the motivation to stop. But I'm urging, I think their attitude is, you humans need to figure out, you planet Earth need to figure out your own path. And you have technology and motivation and skills that allow you to fix climate change and allow you to do anti-gravity and to do fusion and things like that would enable a transformation of the planet. And I'm certainly working on fusion all the time. And I think that they've cracked anti-gravity, but it's sort of hidden and off-world or outside normal government or military control, and they've lost control. That's maybe another reason why they don't want to admit the truth, because they're not in control. Nobody's in control of it anymore, or the ETs are in control. So it gets pretty speculative, but that's my big motivation, is that I'm focused on how do you lower the price of electricity and upgrade everybody to a more fair and higher standard of living.
Ryan, do you have any doubts, without over dramatizing the situation, that for every Ryan Wood who is doing their best as an independent or as a member of a small team to perfect a rudimentary apparatus that's practical to manufacture and really kicks ass and works, every time it comes to fruition and either patents are applied for or people hear about it, that at best the property is purchased, and not to put it into production, but keep it repressed. That we have a history of perhaps somebody 30 years ago whose path you're following now in terms of the fusion that work that you're doing, that got to that point and beyond, and that it was, I'm doing it. I'm running the power on my house here. And, like the mob, we can just either erase you, or you can sell it to us and have a nice, comfortable life for the rest of your life with, money that will more than cover it. But leave it alone. Leave it alone. And off on a tangent, do you remember a film called The Formula? It starred an older Marlon Brando.
No.
Basically, he was a GI who, at the end of the war, captured a German with paperwork for.
Okay.
And the way that his character handled it into the future, or chose not to, is the plot. It's actually a good film and kind of touches on the same area that we're in right now.
It's a fair concern, Peter, as to what these things historically have been suppressed, and I think of Stanley Myers, run the car on water, and xenon or argon with a special spark plug and mysteriously dies. I mean, there's a long history of inventors that are close to big deals. I think that fundamentally, I'm more a business corporate guy than a technical inventor. And so I think that has been the Achilles heel of the history, is that they've been more inventors. But, it's not to say that it won't happen. But please do call me out if I suddenly don't return your phone calls and I've gone to Tahiti or the Bahamas.
Nothing personal. Your children will remember you as the good father that you are.
Well, I mean, that's right.
At this age, and may I ask how old your kids are at this point?
Well, I'm 68, but they're in high school. I started late. I mean, I got one in college who's about ready to graduate, and two are juniors in high school. So they're going off to college. So
Are they
a lot of money to put them through college?
So I understand. Children are a very expensive thing to have.
Yeah.
Which you know very well. Are any of your children showing any interest in these area of study that are your interest?
No. Is the short answer. But it's like, they tolerate dad, and although my son,
I'm the coolest dad you know.
I know. My son
Stay
is very
home, Dad.
talented at math and science, and so he wants to do astrophysics. So I think I'm holding out hope there. And my oldest is very in tune with the movies and sci-fi and Marvel, and she wants to like write stuff. And
Really?
Yeah, I mean, so that's, but she'll never admit that ETs are cool, or well, I'm not sure they're cool, but nevertheless,
it's still pretty nerdy stuff, especially if your father's interested.
Like, they now believe me that Grush has been on TV, and so for growing up, they just sort of tolerated it and was quiet. It's like trying to deal with parents that are alcoholics or something like that, or something they want to shy away from or not talk about.
My father's into UFOs. Can we talk about something else?
Right. That's right. It's, but every once in a while they see me on TV or something like that. Or I'm watching Ancient Aliens, and oh yeah, there's Rich Dolan, there's Linda Howe, there's Peter Robbins, all these people that I know, and I had a great time with the Crash Retrieval Conferences, and gave everybody a chance to share their story and voice, and I did what I could do then.
Do you feel there's a chance in your as the children escape the nest that you might want to go back to putting together a yearly conference, or that has nicely worked out of your system?
I think it's worked out of my system, but I might, incentivize other people, Contact in the Desert or other rabbit hole people to tell the story, engage with more crashes. I mean, fundamentally, ufology has got three major problems. It has a financial problem, is that there's not enough money in ufology. I don't know, maybe there's a few $1 million spent on everything. It's not $100 million. And to sponsor research to go to the next level. It has a credibility problem, is that, hey, we're doing our best out here, but we don't have retired whistleblower insiders that are, Obama and Clinton and Hillary and others. Well, maybe they don't have credibility, but you need high credibility people to say, this is real, this is important, and you should pay attention to it. And the final thing, sort of wrapping it all up, is leadership. You know, MUFON does their thing, Contact in the Desert does thing. There's all these podcasters going. There's no sort of unified effort. Everybody's doing their best to make a difference, like you with this program and others. You know, you're doing what you can do, and that is a form of leadership. But it'd be great to have a more centralized effort, or maybe a more distributed effort. But either way, it just needs more effort.
Yeah. I think people that do what we do are generally still considered, we're not outsiders anymore, but we're not establishment. It's still an area where there is no regulation. We do not have the equivalent of a bar association or an AMA. If you fabricate results, you don't lose your license to practice. And what really are the requirements of hanging out your shingle as a ufologist? As I recall, it's a variation on touch your finger to your nose, turn around 3 times, and call yourself a ufologist. There is no qualifications or area of study. If I guess the closest thing that we have is if you are one of a number of thousands of people, as a MUFON member, which is the largest UFO organization in the world, but still has 1% of 1% of 1% of the the world's population as their members. If you're a trained investigator and you're caught not being ethical or honest or however with your work, you can lose your MUFON investigator's card. Your life will go on. But again, so much of it, because so many people are filled with so much longing, and there's so much that we'd like to change. That idea of I want to believe, the mantra of the X-Files. I had Ron Janix on a couple of weeks ago, who's the head honcho, as you know, over at Contact in the Desert. A very interesting, smart, and knowledgeable guy. And my thinking, he just said it. No, I don't want to believe. I want to know. And
I think that's the data to believe,
Belief really
the wrong word.
Yeah, people have, especially when I was earlier in the work, do you believe UFOs are real? I said, well, as somebody who has not experienced it but had profound sightings, yes, there's real as the chair that I'm sitting in, but what one is to the other, individual cases. That longing for change and longing for them to be what we want them to be, whatever that may be, or the longing that they're not going to be our, like my favorite bad aliens, the Martians from Mars Attacks. They don't get any more bad or funny than those guys do. That belief, unfortunately, is functioning at a higher and higher level among people who, okay, I know what I believe about UFOs now. And I have colleagues and friends who share my beliefs. And we have faith in our beliefs. And, we're united around them. And we want to see this agenda put forward, or, these admonitions taken seriously by the world, when you're now involved in something more like religion than in investigation.
Data and science are my religion.
Yeah. And I am often the first to say to myself, I can't prove you wrong. You can make the wildest claim imaginable, and I don't have the data at hand to prove you wrong. What I can do is, if you say there are X number of races visiting this planet, a favorite bone for me to pick on, whatever you're saying, there is no empirical way that data has come to you in a way that is accurate. It might not be 37, it might be 34 or 187 or 3 or all aliens are good or all aliens. These things serve no one and just give more ammunition to the naysayers. I think you know better than most people, it's very important that we all maintain our skepticism, because one case or one investigation or one sighting or one allegation on the surface may seem like another one, but may be completely different.
And that's exactly why I wrote Majic Eyes Only in the beginning, is that it was the preponderance of these crashes and the preponderance of evidence that was impressive to me as the scientist data guy, saying, wow, if only one of them's true, to quote Nick Pope, it changes everything. So, I mean, it's important to have a broad brush and be skeptical at times and be open. You know, my father was fond of saying it's better to be gullible than skeptical.
Well, gullible rather than there's such a big difference between a skeptic and a debunker.
Right.
We need to be skeptics. We're debunkers, and this is a favorite wonderful bit of dry humor, Bud Hopkins used to come back to. Debunkers, we should all look up to them with great reverence and respect. They know the unknowable, Ryan. I'm not sure if you're aware. They know that this idea of UFOs, some of them being machines of, they're all explainable. And you've reminded me that it was Stan Friedman, I'm paraphrasing ever so slightly, who made the definitive statement. The question is not, are UFOs advanced technology from parts unknown, under intelligent control, coming and going with impunity? The question is, has one ever been? And the answer to that, of course, is yes.
Right.
I miss Stan. Stan Friedman was one of, I think, everybody's favorite individuals in the work.
Those giant eyebrows were really something.
It's true. his a happy warrior overall.
Happy warrior,
somebody who made a difference for sure. Ryan, aside from going to majesticdocuments.com, where it's a very well organized site where people can learn more, read more, order books, any way where people can follow you or stay in touch with what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can sign up for our newsletter on that site or on my book site, Majic Eyes Only, MAJIC, eyesonly.com. I mean, and then there's also another website dedicated to the authenticity of the Special Operations Manual called specialoperationsmanual.com. So that has all the various concerns, objections, and commentary and feedback about that particular book. And then the one of the other, I mean, Amazon has everything, all the books. One of the other ones we didn't briefly talk to or wrap up was the Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers by Vernon Bowen. Which
Thank you. That was the one I didn't pull.
Yeah, that's fine. This one is also available on Amazon, and it says the highest classification for this document is top secret magic, no foreign dissemination for U.S. eyes only, exempt from declassification or RADA, originating agency, special handling, not releasable to foreign nationals. So this is another one that's very well written, but it's basically all sorts of historical 50s and before flying saucer encounters.
And believe it or not,
UFOs, everything.
That takes us to the end of our 2 hours. Ryan Wood, a true pleasure spending this time with you and reconnecting. Please remember to Susie, Linda, your dad, and let's stay in touch.
Thanks, Peter.
And to our